The sun hung low over the plains, painting the horizon in streaks of gold and fire. Dust rolled across the wide road leading into Willow Creek, a town known for its cattle auctions, its saloons, and the sprawling Bar H ranch that stretched further than most men could ride in a day. On that road walked a woman. Her dress was torn at the hem, her shoes scuffed thin from miles of travel. She carried nothing but a worn shawl across her shoulders. Hunger had hollowed her cheeks, yet there was dignity in the way she held her chin high despite the stares of strangers as she passed through town. Her name was Clara. She had knocked on doors before, farmhouses, kitchens, even a churchyard, but folks had only handed her a crust of bread or turned her away with pity. Tonight, though, she carried hope for one more try, even if it meant facing the owner of the richest ranch in the territory. The Bar H gates loomed ahead, iron and oak, proud as the man who owned them. Inside, rancher James Hollis was finishing the day's work. Tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair showing just a hint of gray, he carried the weight of both wealth and sorrow. Since his wife's passing 3 years before, he had poured his soul into cattle, land, and keeping his ranch afloat. His heart remained closed, save for one tender corner reserved for his only daughter. Little Annie Hollis, 6 years old, played on the porch with a rag doll, her golden braids catching the last of the sunlight. It was Annie who first saw the stranger approaching. She tilted her head, watching the woman stop at the gate, fingers curled tight around the post as though gathering courage. "Papa," Annie called softly. "Someone's here." James stepped from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes narrowed as he studied the figure, thin, weary, but not without a quiet strength. When Clara spoke, her voice trembled with both humility and resolve. "Sir," she began, I don't ask for much. Only a bite of food, leftovers will do, and a place to rest out of the wind. Just for the night." James's jaw tightened. He had seen beggars before. Many sought the generosity of the Bar H, knowing his barns were full. Yet something in the woman's tone stopped him from turning away. "You've come a long way," he said at last. Clara nodded. Too far to turn back. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Annie, curious, had crept closer, her doll forgotten in the dirt. She studied Clara with wide, searching eyes, as if some hidden thread tugged between them. James sighed, rubbing his neck. "One night. Supper's on the table. You can have a plate." Clara lowered her head in gratitude. "Thank you, sir." Inside the ranch house, warmth and the scent of roasted beef wrapped around her like a blanket. Clara sat timidly at the table, hands folded, waiting until James nodded for her to eat. She tried to keep her bite small, but hunger betrayed her. Each taste filled her with tears she blinked away quickly. Annie climbed into the chair beside her, eyes never leaving the stranger's face. The child's small hand brushed against Clara's sleeve, as if testing whether she was real. James noticed but said nothing. Halfway through the meal, Annie suddenly whispered a word that froze the room. "Mama." James nearly dropped his fork. His chest tightened, breath caught between disbelief and sorrow. Since his wife's passing, Annie had not spoken that word aloud, not once. Clara looked down at the girl, startled, heart racing. "Sweetheart, I'm not." But Annie leaned closer, resting her little head against Clara's arm, as if the matter was already decided. James stared, torn between grief and anger, but also something deeper, something he could not name. Clara's eyes lifted to meet his, shimmering with both apology and longing. "I'll be gone by morning," she whispered. Yet in that moment, James Hollis knew the decision might no longer be his alone. Morning light spilled across the ranch yard, gilding the barns and fences in soft gold. Clara had risen before dawn, quietly intending to leave. She didn't want to impose any longer than necessary. Yet when she reached for the door, Annie stirred in her little bed and whispered, "Mama, don't go." The word struck Clara's heart with both sweetness and pain. She smoothed the girl's hair, kissed her forehead, and promised only, "I'll be here a little while longer." By the time James came down for breakfast, Clara was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled, frying eggs as though she had belonged there her whole life. He paused in the doorway, watching her. Something about the way she moved, careful yet capable, stirred memories of a time when laughter filled this house. He shook himself. She was a stranger. He had to remember that. "You didn't need to cook," he said gruffly. Clara turned, offering a shy smile. "I wanted to earn my supper. Work is no burden to me." James only grunted, though inside, a warmth he hadn't felt in years flickered. Whispers of the town. Over the next days, Clara stayed on, helping with chores without being asked. She patched Annie's dress, swept the porch, and even mended a broken bridle in the barn. The ranch hands began to nod at her with respect, whispering about the newcomer who worked as hard as any man and carried herself like a lady. But word traveled fast in Willow Creek. By the week's end, tongues wagged at the mercantile. James Hollis took in a beggar woman, they said. She's angling for his wealth, mark my words. No one spread the tale faster than Martha Colton, widow of a banker and long determined to become Mrs. Hollis. With her sharp tongue and sharper eyes, she wasted no time riding out to the bar-h. James found her waiting by the corral, lips pressed in a smile too tight to be kind. "James," she said sweetly, "you're too generous for your own good. Letting some tramp play house in your kitchen? Folks are starting to talk." James's jaw clenched. "Clara's no tramp. She's decent, and she's helped more than you know." Martha sniffed. "Mark me, your kindness will cost you. That woman's after something. Why else would a child mistake her for a mother?" That struck James like a lash. He turned away, but Martha's words followed him long after she left. A bond too deep. That evening, Clara sat with Annie on the porch steps, teaching her how to stitch a doll's dress from scraps. James watched unseen from the doorway. Annie's laughter rang like bells, her small hands clumsy but determined as Clara guided her. "Why do you call her Mama?" James asked suddenly, stepping into the light. His voice carried a rough edge. Annie looked up, wide-eyed. "Because she feels like Mama. I don't remember Mama's face much anymore, Papa. But when Clara holds me, it feels the same." The child's innocence carved a hollow ache in James's chest. He turned his gaze to Clara, whose expression wavered between sorrow and tenderness. "James," she said softly, "I never meant to replace anyone." Annie's heart simply reached for mine. "And mine," she broke off, pressing a hand to her chest. "Mine couldn't turn her away." For a long time, silence stretched, broken only by the cricket song. At last James said, "Stay a while longer. Annie needs you." Clara's throat tightened, but she nodded. "If you'll have me." Storms on the horizon. Weeks passed, and Clara's presence grew into something more than temporary. She rose before dawn, worked beside the men, and at night told Annie stories by lamplight. Slowly, James found himself drawn to the warmth she brought back into his home. But storms were gathering. One evening, while Clara hung laundry near the barn, a pair of rough riders rode up uninvited. Strangers, smelling of whiskey and trouble, they dismounted with lazy grins. "Evenin', miss," one drawled. "Didn't know Hollis kept such fine company. Maybe you'd like better company than his." Clara froze, clutching the basket. Before they could step closer, James strode from the barn, fury in every line of his body. "You boys best get back on your horses before I put you there myself." The men laughed, but one look at James's steady hand resting on the butt of his revolver was enough. They spat in the dust, mounted, and rode off. Clara's hands shook as she gathered the spilled laundry. James stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You're safe here. I won't let anyone harm you." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "No one's ever stood for me before." For a moment, the distance between them vanished. James reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her cheek. The air between them hummed with something unspoken, something dangerous and tender. The decision. But Martha Colton was not done. She stirred the town against Clara, whispering poison in the pastor's ear, in shopkeepers' corners. Soon, James heard the warnings. If you let that woman stay, you'll lose respect. She'll ruin you. One night, James returned from town tense and silent. Clara, sensing the weight on him, asked gently, "What troubles you?" He hesitated, then forced the words out. "They say you're here for what I have. That you're not fit to raise Annie." Clara flinched as if struck. "I never asked for your money. Only a meal and a place to rest. If my being here harms you, I'll go." Annie, who had been listening from the stair, cried out, running to Clara. She wrapped her arms around her waist, sobbing, "Don't leave! Please, Mama, don't leave me!" James's heart cracked open. He saw the terror in his daughter's eyes, the love in Clara's embrace, and the truth he had been denying. Clara belonged here, not because of charity, but because she had become the heart of this family. He crossed the room, taking Clara's hands in his. "Forgive me. I let pride and gossip blind me. But I see now, you're not here for what I have. You're here because of who you are. And Annie's right. You are her mama, in every way that matters." Tears slid down Clara's cheeks as James's voice deepened, unguarded at last. "Stay. Not as a guest, but as my partner. As my wife." Clara's breath caught. For years she had wandered, unwanted and unseen. Now, beneath the wide skies of the Bar H, she had found not only shelter, but a home. "Yes," she whispered. "I'll stay." A new beginning. The wedding came quietly, with only the ranch hands, a preacher, and the endless plains as witnesses. Annie clutched Clara's hand through the vows, her little face glowing with joy. When James slid the ring onto Clara's finger, he looked at her not as a beggar who had asked for scraps, but as the woman who had mended his broken home. That night, under the stars, Clara whispered to Annie as she tucked her into bed, "I came here with nothing, but you gave me everything." And Annie, half asleep, murmured the word that had started it all. "Mama." James, standing in the doorway, drew Clara into his arms. For the first time in years, laughter and love filled the ranch house once more. The woman who had asked only for leftovers and a corner to sleep had found instead a family, and a forever home.